It's been a while, obviously, as evident from my face. Um, this mic is like pretty hard to figure out. So today we are going to be talking about a book that I just finished reading. It's Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell. I'm coming to this straight from Animal Farm, also by George Orwell. They're both really good reads. Okay, they're both like solid books. So anyone looking out for a good book to read, this is it. Like both Animal Farm and Homage to Catalonia, they're both really good books. So solid recommend right there. So about Homage to Catalonia, which is the book that we're going to be talking about right now. The book was, to be honest, I liked Animal Farm more than Homage to Catalonia, but that's probably because Animal Farm was it was more breezy, if you could say. It was an easy read. I could just sit down leisurely, just sink into it, and it had me gripped. And I can't say that about Homage to Catalonia because it was pretty slow. You have to have some patience reading through it, and a couple words in there I needed to figure out, like I need a dictionary in hand. And Homage to Catalonia is the kind of book that you got to put in a little bit of effort to read, but it's worth it though. It's definitely worth it. Homage to Catalonia is like George Orwell's first hand record or memoir of the war he was in, right, in Spain. So he portrays the time that he spent in the war with his faction, and also how the rivalry, it developed between these factions that were part of the war. So the book, what I liked the most about the book is how it was really in your face. Like it gets super real, right? It gets super real super quick. I mean, it's a war we're talking about, and it's George Orwell we're talking about. The guy is a legend. So he gets like really in there, and it's very gripping how it gets disturbingly real at sometimes, right? How he talks about, the soldiers getting lice in their trousers and all that during the war, how they have to spend 60 hours without sleep. I mean, I pull all-nighters all the time, right? But pulling an all-nighter at home in the comfort of my bed and, having my phone, my laptop, and my music and my movies and my artwork. Pulling all-nighters in your own comfort is kind of easy. But the same, imagining being a part of a war, pulling all-nighters, being covered in mud, lice, like he says, risking your life. I mean, if you actually think about it, enough, deprivation of sleep in the battlefield, and you'll probably come to a point where, what, if you're going to shoot me, at least I'll get some sleep. It gets pretty hard, right? War is not easy. War is, I mean, it's one of those things that has to be, even though it really shouldn't be, right? It's these kind of uncomfortable truths, facts that this book puts in your face right up. And that's why I like it. That's why I like this book. And even in the grim reality of war that he's writing this book in, and the picture of war that he's trying to give us, I like how he sprinkles a bit of humor in between this shades of grey, right? I like how he talks about getting shot and then conveniently says he thought about his wife. I mean, cheesy stuff, but it makes sense, yeah, understandable. But then there are other, little bits here and there. This casually slipped in humor in this book. It's on point. I mean, I kind of noted down all the bits and pieces that I liked in this book, and I got a few over here. Like let me just get you some of my favorites here. So he says he meets a person, right, and then this is what he describes that person with. He says, "It was the first time I had seen someone whose profession was telling lies, unless you count journalists." I I really like that line. I mean, obviously, he's not referring to all journalists, right? But then we do know journalists who kind of spice things up for the TRP rating and PG-13. I swear a lot. And then he gets shot, right? And then obviously he's healing and recovering, and then to point out the horrible conditions of the roads in the place where they're battling, he says, "No horse has thrown me as high as these trucks." I mean, we've all seen bad roads, right? I liked how he described that. And apart from these few lines that slip in the horror, I mean, slip in the humor in the horror of war, it's like a refreshment after a marathon in muddy water, if that makes sense, because that's what the book is. It's a collection of the grim realities of war, and here and there in the middle you get offered some hey, you know what, calm down, here, have a drink kind of humor in between. But then you have to come back to focus on what's the core message in this book. So those highlights, the sentences in the book that highlights the actual core message of what the book is trying to tell us, I've got a list of those here as well. And before we get to it, what I really liked about the book was, I mean, obviously it's like I said, how it very realistically depicts the war, but what I also like is how very straightforward George Orwell is with inaccuracies. He says several times in his book, in this book, he says several times that it's his version of the war. Like, he says in several occasions that it's his words and it's his thoughts, it's his perspective of the war. Because I think that's very important to notice, because there are several sides to every story, and you shouldn't draw conclusions with just a few sides of it. And by saying that, he says, though we get a really nice perspective of the war he fought from his book, he says there are other versions to the story, other sides that we have to look at, other sides that are probably not looked at while we look into this side. It's nice how he points it out. I mean, most people don't say this is just my version of the story, maybe you should look into other versions of the story also. But that is important, and I like how he does that. And also the way he brings out the politics in war as well. I mean, war isn't just two countries or two factions or two groups just going head to head. There's always other variables involved, which probably won't come out. A large majority of the people are going to be thinking, okay, this war is this group against this group, or these groups against these groups, or whatever, right? This idea versus this idea. That's what most people think of war. But then he talks about how there are other insidious or hidden truths within, right? Like, a war isn't just what it is on the outside, it's also what's happening on the inside. And that's pretty nicely highlighted here in the book. He brings out the politics involved and the dirty lies inside. It's disheartening to read, but then it's important that we do read it. Uncomfortable truths. We gotta know it, even though it's not very comforting to know it. Pretty gripping book. Takes time, takes effort, but it's worth the read. Do I recommend it? Of course I recommend it. Anyone that's looking for a good read, pick up George Orwell's Homage to Catalonia and put in the time. I think you'll enjoy it, and I think it's going to give you a new perspective of war and politics and media. And another line, just struck me. Another line that I liked in this book was a particular sentence in which he says, the left media is as deceitful as the right media. I mean, irrespective of whose propaganda who's pushing, I mean, they're still pushing propaganda. They both sides have to come up with dubious ways to sell their I don't want to swear, but then you have to read in between the lines. Sometimes you have to read behind the lines also. I mean, you don't get the full picture always. You have to solve the puzzle, kind of get all the bits and pieces available, put it together, see what's obvious and see what's not obvious. I like how he points that about the media and the kind of things they propagate. I mean, and the fact that this came out so many years ago and it's still relevant to today's situation, in today's scenario, in today's kind of media situation. It's nice how certain things don't change. And towards the conclusion, almost towards the end of the book, right, he says this line, I mean, not exactly his words, but then he says something along the lines of, he felt more human with his discharge papers. So in a way, his injury, which caused him to almost lose his life, but then he survived, and then he went to hospital to recover, and because of the injury, he was not fit to be a part of war. And he says it kind of made him feel more human. To get shot, to feel more human, that's what war does. And that kind of explains all the PTSD stuff soldiers go through. There's so much that this book's gotta tell you, man. This is so much in this book. Read it, learn from it, remember the messages in it. That's it for now, I guess. Until next time, see you with a new video next time, hopefully. New content, maybe new movie, new book. I don't know. See you with something new next time. Until then, be good. Take care. Ta-da.